Good morning. It's good to have you here today. And if you've been following our Bible Doctrine series, you will notice that we are in a different spot today. We aren't in the cozy office today. We are actually in one of our classrooms. And believe it or not, I actually have a live class here today. And so that's kind of exciting and had the opportunity to do that. And so you may hear some folks there, and that is our live class. But we're excited that you are joining us as well. And we left off last time in the middle of 9.3, and so we will turn there. And we talked about some participants of the tribulation period. And by way of review, since I've got a live class, all right, I can ask a couple of questions. What are three ways that the tribulation is described? What are three ways that the tribulation is described? Yes?
Trials or troubles.
All right. General trials and troubles. What's the second way?
The second part of the tribulation, or known as the Great Tribulation.
All right. There's a section called the Great Tribulation. And then do you remember the third?
The 7 years.
All right. Just the general 7-year tribulation. All right. Good. All three parts. Way to call that off the top of your head there. All right. The tribulation is called for Israel, the last part of the tribulation, the second half of the tribulation for Israel is called what?
Jacob's sorrow.
All right, Jacob's trouble. Jacob's trouble, all right, and that's found in Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7. All right, during the tribulation, many people will receive what? All right.
The mark of the beast.
That is true, all right. That's not what I was thinking about, but
Christ.
All right. Many people will be saved, all right. There will be a lot of people saved, all right. Your answer is not wrong, all right. For the quiz, though, you want the other answer, all right. And then we talked about some participants in the Antichrist, in the tribulation, and the first one was faith. I gave away the answer just a second ago. All right, Jacob.
The Antichrist.
The Antichrist. The Antichrist. And I put her on the spot, so that was my fault. All right. The Antichrist. And he is known as the first beast, known as the son of perdition, known by several things. And then we have his sidekick. You might say his religious sidekick.
False prophet.
The false prophet. All right. Very, very good. All right. And with the Antichrist, the false prophet, and Satan forms what? What do we call that?
The false trinity.
All right, the unholy trinity or the false trinity. And of course, Satan being the kind of equivalent of God the Father in that. The Antichrist being the Christ form of that. And the false prophet being the Holy Spirit part of that, right? All right, we left off. And write this down in your notes now. We're going to talk about the two witnesses. The two witnesses. All right, and they are found in Revelation chapter 11. And go ahead and turn your Bibles to Revelation chapter 11. And Revelation chapter 11. And these are two people that God uses to give the gospel out during the tribulation. Of course, we already talked about another group. We kind of briefly mentioned the 144,000. And they are Jewish missionaries. All right, 12,000 from each tribe that will also tell the gospel. But these guys, they're kind of interesting guys, and they are the two witnesses. They're apparently almost like two prophets. They are not named. However, we have some ideas of who they possibly could be. All right, once again, this is not dogmatic, but write it down. There is... oftentimes thought that they are Moses and Elijah. Moses and Elijah. And once again, the Bible doesn't say that's who they are, all right? But there are some reasons why we would think that, all right? And your book lists several. First of all, both of them were prophets, all right? And so we know that. Moses and Elijah, they were both prophets. Also, both were on the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus Christ. Remember when Jesus appeared in his glorified body with his disciples, Peter, James, and John? And the two guys that appeared with him, all right, Moses and Elijah. And, you know, the Bible says in the book of Luke that they were talking about the death of Christ that was to come. So think about that. Can you imagine that conversation? I don't know what it was, but maybe they were saying, all right, Jesus, is it time for us to do our part again? I don't know, but nonetheless, both of them were in the Mount of Transfiguration, so they both kind of came back at one point. Another interesting thing is when we think about sections of the Bible, Moses gave us what as far as the Bible is concerned? Anybody take a guess?
10 Commandments.
All right, the Ten Commandments, which is called the
Law of Moses.
The law, right? Moses is representative of the law. When you think about an Old Testament prophet, though, generally the guy you think about is Elijah. And so we've got the law and the prophets. And so that's another reason why oftentimes we think that these two guys were it. All right, but let's look in Revelation chapter 11, and let's see some stuff about these two guys. And look at verse 3. It says, "And I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth." And that is 3.5 years. So for half of the tribulation, they will prophesy. Now, people will argue about if it's the first half or the second half. The book says that it's the first half. I've heard good arguments on both. I've heard some arguments that say it's part in the first half and part in the second half. All right. Nonetheless, they do prophesy for 3.5 years. Look at verse 5. It says, "And if any man will hurt them, fire proceeded out of their mouth and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed." These guys are fire breathing. And now, who was a guy that was protected by fire before?
Elijah.
Elijah. Remember, he called down fire from heaven when those captains of 50 were coming to get him. And now he didn't breathe it out, but he called down fire from heaven. So once again, another kind of similarity. Notice verse 6. "And these have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy." All right, anybody want to guess somebody who did that? Shut the heavens, that it wouldn't rain? Elijah, all right? Elijah did that, all right? James chapter 5, verse 17 says that Elias was a man of like passions as we are, and it says that he shut heaven for 3 years and 6 months, by the way, which is exactly the amount of time the two witnesses are on earth. So once again, very similar in the actions that they do. Verse 6, "These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over water to turn them to blood." Who did that?
Moses.
Moses, all right, with the plagues. All right, and then it says, "And to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will." And of course, we know Moses was the guy who did the 10 plagues on Egypt. All right, so we see that. All right, a couple other things. All right, so we see they both appeared on Transfiguration. They both have similar works that they did in regards to what they did on earth before. Seems to be what the two witnesses are doing as well. One of the arguments for Elijah is that he has not died. All right, does anybody know how Elijah ended his days on earth? All right.
God took him up in a
All right, God took him up in a whirlwind into heaven. He is one of two guys that have not died. All right, Enoch being the other. Sometimes people will argue that it's Enoch and Elijah. There's not as much, proof. It seems like it's Enoch, but nonetheless, they will say, well, it's appointed unto man once to die, and Elijah didn't die, so he's got to come back and die. I think that's kind of a weak argument, but nonetheless, some people will make that argument. All right, one strong one for Elijah. Turn to Malachi chapter 4. Malachi chapter 4. Last book in the Old Testament. Malachi chapter 4. Look at verse 5. It says, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse." The last prophecy in the Old Testament says that Elijah is going to come back before the second coming of Christ. And some people will point to the fact that John the Baptist could have fulfilled that. And Jesus said to the Jews, if if you will accept John the Baptist, he says, if you will accept John the Baptist, he can be the Elijah that should come. He said, Jesus said, if they'll accept him, he could have fulfilled this prophecy. But the question is, did they accept John the Baptist? They did not accept John the Baptist. They did not accept Jesus. And so I believe that Elijah will still be coming someday. And it's kind of interesting, the Passover feast, the Jews actually set an empty place setting for Elijah the prophet. And so when they have Passover, they have a plate and a cup of wine there for Elijah. And he's kind of like the Santa Claus for the Jews, because the verse says that he'll turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and he'll kind of make everything right. They actually are looking forward to Elijah coming back. They think that he'll kind of right all the wrongs, and so he's kind of like the guy that will bring all the good stuff back. And so the parents during Passover, they'll tell their kids, watch the door, Elijah may come back. And sometimes they'll bump the table and spill some of the wine out of the glass to make it look like, and they'll say, oh, maybe he was here, maybe he drank some of the wine. And they'll play games like that with their kids. But nonetheless, the Jews are very much looking forward to this prophecy being fulfilled. So we do see that, all right? And one of the arguments for Moses, turn to the book of Jude. Turn to the book of Jude, the book just before Revelation. And I kind of find this one interesting as well. The book of Jude. Look at verse number 9. Jude, verse 9, it says, yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuked thee. And here we see that apparently there was some kind of argument over the body of Moses. Now, who knows how Moses was buried? Who remembers? Yes? God buried Moses, all right? Nobody knows exactly where Moses was buried, all right? Obviously the devil does, all right? And the devil was trying to do something with the body of Moses. We're not sure what he was after there, but God sent Michael the archangel to stop the devil from doing whatever he was going to do with the body of Moses. And they had an argument there, not a physical confrontation, but they did have an argument there over the body of Moses. So it makes you wonder if the body of Moses, if there's something like that, it's got to be around for it at some point in time. So those are some arguments there. Once again, we're not sure who it could be. It might be two of you guys. Right? That would be kind of fun, wouldn't it? Right? God send you back, and nobody can kill you, all right, for at least 15.5 years. All right, and you can breathe fire and preach and do all kinds of miracles. That would be kind of fun to me, I think. But nonetheless, in the end, these guys are killed by the Antichrist. God does allow the Antichrist to kill him, and they lay their dead bodies out in the street for 3.5 days. And the Bible says, in fact, go back to Revelation chapter 11, if you didn't hold your spot there. Look at verse 9. It says, and they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3.5 days, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them, and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because the two prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth. And after 3.5 days, the Spirit of life from God entered into them. And they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. Now, it's pretty interesting that the Bible says that the whole world sees them. Now, I find that kind of exciting because we did not have that kind of technology until the last 20, 30 years, with satellite technology, with internet technology. Of course, nowadays, you're watching this video, maybe around the world, right? Think about it. This would not have been possible before for the whole world to see two guys' dead bodies laying in the streets of Jerusalem. But it is now. And so that means that we are very much closer to the end time things than we were before. All right? Notice in your books there, scriptures concerning the tribulation. Scriptures concerning the tribulation. The first one there is Daniel chapter 9. And let's go ahead and turn there. Daniel chapter 9. We won't spend a lot of time there, but I want you to at least see it. Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. And this is one of the greatest prophecies in the whole Bible. It's called Daniel's 70 Weeks. And basically what it is Daniel asks God, how are the people of Israel going to get right with you, God? He's praying, he's seeking God, and God sends Gabriel to give him a message, says, this is my plan for Israel. And he says, 70 weeks, look at verse 24, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation of iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and the prophecy and to anoint the most holy. So he says, I'm going to take 70 weeks to basically get Israel right with him. Now, what did he mean by 70 weeks? Now, we would think of a week as, what? 7 days, right? All right? He's not talking about 490 days, all right? The Jews had a little bit different idea of weeks. They had weeks of days, like we have. They also had what's called weeks of years. We see that in the book of Leviticus, all right? Leviticus chapter 26, actually, where it talks about weeks of years. They would have they would labor 6 days, and on the seventh day they would rest. It was the Sabbath day, right? The exciting thing for the Jews was they would labor 6 years. And on the seventh year, guess what they were supposed to do? Rest for a whole year. All right, can you imagine that, 1 year off of school? All right, that'd be exciting. Sabbath year, all right, take a year off. That was something, and they called it a week of years. And that's what God is referring to here. He says, I'm going to take 70 weeks, 490 years, to get Israel right with him. And he actually labels it off here. Look at verse 25. It says, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem, and unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks. All right, and so he said 7 weeks, which is 7 times 7 is what? 49 years. He says from the time of this prophecy, 49 years later, Jerusalem's going to be rebuilt. By the way, do you remember who rebuilt a lot of Jerusalem? Yep. Zerubbabel. Who else?
Joshua.
Joshua the high priest, yeah. Nehemiah, all right. Ezra was part of that as well. Those guys were part of rebuilding Jerusalem. And basically from the going forth of the commandments, that commandment is found in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 1, where, remember, Nehemiah asked the king, look, my city's in waste, and he gives that commandment. 49 years from that day, Jerusalem was rebuilt. And so that was fulfilled. And then it says, look at verse 25 in the middle, and 62 weeks the street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. From the time that Jerusalem was rebuilt until Jesus Christ died on the cross, all right, was 434 years. By the way, to the point in time. In fact, some and I won't go into it, but some chronologers have actually gone through the calendar and basically said that Jesus Christ likely died on the cross in, I think it was like April, I've seen 2 dates, April 2nd, AD 32. I've also seen April 6th, AD 32. Sometimes they'll argue about which year, 32 or 30. I think a lot of it has to do with what they do with year zero and stuff like that. But nonetheless, they actually have labeled it down to pretty much the hour. This prophecy was fulfilled pretty much to the day. All right, so we had 49 years, we had 434 years, but you'll notice there's 7 years left. If you add those up, well, that's only 483 years. All right, notice what the last week deals with. Look at verse 26. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come. Now, the prince that shall come, that is the Antichrist. All right? And to notice it says the people of the prince that shall come, not the prince himself, but the people of the prince that shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Who in history destroyed the city of Jerusalem and the sanctuary? Titus, who was a general of what army? The Roman Empire. And so the Roman Empire did destroy the city, and they did destroy the temple. All right? And by the way, the Antichrist comes out of the Roman Empire. And notice it says, and the end thereof shall be a flood, and unto the end wars and desolations are determined. And he, that prince that shall come, he's the Antichrist, shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. How long is that? 7 years. So what's the Antichrist going to do? He's going to make a covenant for 7 years. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice of oblation to cease. And for overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So the Antichrist is going to, that last week, by the way, there was a period, a break between the Jesus Christ dying on the cross until the tribulation. And by the way, we see the break in the verses. It talks about the people of the prince that shall come to destroy the city. There will be things happening between there, and we've seen that part. And we're not in the tribulation yet, so that's coming. But when the tribulation happens, the Antichrist will come in peace. That's how he wins, by the way. He comes in peace. He seems like a peaceful guy. And he'll actually make a peace treaty. By the way, he'll allow, look at this, the temple to be rebuilt. Right? There's sacrifices being done there. He'll allow the Jews to perform their sacrifices and do their stuff. He'll actually kind of take care of the Jews. All right? For the first 3.5 years. And then it says in the midst of there, look at this, the end of the last verse of the chapter, and it says, in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice of oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate. In the middle of that tribulation time, he will commit what's called the abomination of desolation. We talked about that already in one of the last lessons, where he'll defile the temple. More than likely, although it's not stated here, he'll probably sacrifice a pig on the altar, just like Antiochus Epiphanes did. He'll do some things, and he'll not allow the Jews to offer their sacrifices anymore. By the way, you say, how close is this? I don't know, but it seems pretty close. Do you know that right now in warehouses, the Jews have all the stuff prepared for their temple to be rebuilt? They actually have priestly garments already made, to specifications. They actually have priestly, they have the different, the laborers and all the temple furniture. They actually have that made in warehouses right now. Do you know they actually have schools where they have taught young men how to perform the sacrifices? So that once the temple's rebuilt, they can do it. They got people that know how to do the sacrifices and know how to do all of that. It's already ready to go. The only thing they don't have is the plot of land where the temple goes. Anybody want to know why they don't have that land? Anybody know what's there right now?
A Muslim house.
All right, the Dome of the Rock, the third most holy spot for the Muslims. All right. If you know anything about the Muslims, they're not that real interested in sharing their land with anybody, right? Let alone their holy site. And so the Antichrist is going to do a miracle here somewhere. He is going to either convince the Muslims to move the Dome of the Rock, or he's going to convince them to let the Jews build their temple. And of course, Muslims and Jews do not get along. Arabs and Jews do not get along. So he is really going to be quite a good salesman. He's going to make something happen here. Or he's going to destroy the Dome of the Rock. I don't know what he's going to do, but they will rebuild. And by the way, he will seem to be friendly with the Jews. for the first 3.5 years. It's kind of strange there. And there's a lot of things going on that we don't have time to discuss there, but likely some wars that take place that cause an invasion into Jerusalem, and that causes the Antichrist to come in and basically take over. From the last lesson, what is one of the things that he puts in the temple? Right? Actually, he doesn't put it in the temple. I think that false prophet does.
An image of himself.
An image of himself. He puts that in the Jewish temple, and once again, that's definitely defiling the temple, because you're not supposed to have idols in the temple of God. All right, and causing people to worship that. All right. So we see Daniel's 70 weeks. This is the first passage, by the way, that gives us the time how long the tribulation is. It's 7 years. It's the first time we see kind of our outline, our 7-year tribulation, with half of it being the first 3.5 years, and the last half being the last 3.5 years. All right, let's turn to our next passage here. Look at Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24. So Daniel talked about the tribulation. Jesus talked about the tribulation. And Jesus actually used the book of Daniel in his message here. Look at verse 1. And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. So notice they are in Jerusalem. They're talking about the temple. They're showing Jesus the temple, saying, look at this great temple, right? And Jesus said unto them, see ye not all these things? Verily I say to you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. All right, Jesus kind of gives them a shock. This is a prophecy. And as we learned back in, I think it was bibliology, way back then, what happened? When did that happen? What year?
80-70.
80-70, all right? We already mentioned General Titus coming in and knocking over the temple, knocking over Jerusalem. All right, and this was the prophecy. By the way, this was probably around 80-32, 80-33. So this happened just 30-something years later. All right, so they're talking about that. Look at verse 3. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? So they ask him 3 questions. When is this going to happen? All right, what are the signs of your coming, and what is the end of the world? All right, now these guys are Jewish, right? By the way, what is the prophetic view of the Gospels? What are the Gospels looking towards? We had this in the last lesson. The second coming of Christ. And that's exactly what they ask. When is your coming? Second coming. All right, we already discussed Matthew 24 has nothing to do with the rapture. So get it out of your mind, all right? But they asked him, when's your coming? And when's the end of the world? Notice verse 4. And Jesus said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, and shall say, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Who do you think that would be?
The Antichrist.
The Antichrist. By the way, the very first judgment in Revelation, called the seal judgments, this is seal number 1. The Antichrist comes on a white horse. That's found in Revelation chapter 6. Right, so people that say they're Christ and they're not. Look at verse 6. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of war. By the way, that's seal number 2 right there. Revelation chapter 6, there is a red horse, and that specifies war. All right. Look at verse 6. It says, and ye shall hear wars and rumors of war. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines. Anybody want to guess what seal that is? Number 3, the black horse. All right, a famine. And the Bible says that there will be famine during that time, and people will have to work all day long to either buy 1 meal of wheat or 3 meals of barley. The wheat being the kind of nutritious meal, the barley being kind of like the cheap junk food that doesn't really offer a lot of nutrition, all right? But there will be famine during that time. And then it said, and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. Pestilences as part of seal 4. All right, the pale horse, which, by the way, 1/4 of the population of the world will die. All right, so Jesus is going right in row. We'll see that in Revelation in just a minute. It's going right down the road. Seal 5, or actually, seal 5 is martyrs praying to God, so there's nothing that happens really to the earth. But seal 6 is an earthquake. All right, and a lot of other things as well, but earthquake being part of it. Look at verse 8. And these are the beginning of sorrows. Remember that outline that I said that you need to memorize? First half of the tribulation is called the what? The beginning of sorrows. All right, the first 3.5 years. That's why we call it that, because that's what Jesus called it. The sealed judgments take up the first 3.5 years. By the way, do you notice that they're all pretty common stuff that does take place? We have wars today, right? We have famines in places. We have pestilences. We have all these kind of things. Earthquakes. Now, not on this scale, but they are pretty common stuff, all right? And so that's why the first 3.5 years isn't going to seem nearly as bad as the last 3.5 years. They are the beginning of sorrows. Verse 9, then shall they deliver you. By the way, who's Jesus talking to?
The Jews.
All right, he's talking to Jews. He's talking to his disciples here, which are Jews, and he's referring to the Jews. He says, then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. What happens in the middle of the 3.5 years? What do we say from Daniel? Yep.
The abomination of desolation.
All right, the abomination of desolation, right? The Antichrist breaks his treaty. That's why they're going after the Jews now, because the Antichrist begins to go after them. Look at this at verse 10. Then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another, and many false prophets shall rise, and deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved. And by the way, that's not talking about spiritual salvation. That's talking about physical salvation. What Jesus is saying is, look, this is going to be a real bad time for the Jews. And if you can physically survive until the end of this time, you will physically be saved. In the second coming, that's exactly what Jesus does. Is he physically saves the Jews, all right? Look at verse 14. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. When ye shall see the, what's that next words? Abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet. He's quoting Daniel that we just read. Look at, he says, stand in the holy place. Whosoever readeth, let him understand. Now, I always kind of get a little bit of goosebumps when I read that verse. Because what does he say there? He says, whoso, what? Readeth. What book would they be reading? What book is he saying? Matthew. Was Matthew written? Matthew was listening to Jesus saying this. And so he's saying, whosoever readeth this, Jesus is prophesying. I think about the book of Matthew. And he's actually talking to people, by the way, people who might not even be alive right now. People in the future. They could be, maybe. All right. But this is thousands of years ago. Jesus is actually, he's looking at his disciples, but he's actually talking to people who will live 2,000 plus years later. That's pretty amazing when you think about it. The Bible is good for everybody, but Jesus is actually talking to people who won't be alive 1,000 years later. And what's he telling them? He's giving some instructions. Look at verse 16. Then let them which be in the Judea flee into the mountains, and let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe to them that be with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be what? Great tribulation. All right. I do have a class here, I promise. All right. Great tribulation. Now remember our timeline. The first 3.5 years was called the last 3.5 years is called the Great Tribulation. This is where we get it from. All right. Jesus breaking breaking it up. All right, and look at verse 23. And if any man shall say to you, Lo, here's Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall rise false Christ and false false Christ, Antichrist, false prophets, the false prophet, all right, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. These guys are going to try to trick the Jews into believing that that's Messiah. They're going to try to trick Jews, and they would trick some Jews. Jesus says, look, when you see the abomination of desolation happen, you better run to the hills and get to the place that God has provided. By the way, God has a place out there. Some people think it might be Petra. That's a mountain fortress out there. Maybe Masada, another mountain fortress out there. But nonetheless, where God will providentially protect the Jews. But if they leave that place, of protection, they would be killed. And so that's why Jesus says, don't leave. No matter what miracles you see, do not leave that place, because if you leave, you're going to die. And some of them, unfortunately, will die. Look at verse 27. As lightning cometh out of the east and shineth unto the west, even so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. All right, and that is actually a very good description of the sixth seal. All right, so right there. So Jesus kind of lists every one of the sealed judgments and says, and the sixth seal is a bunch of cosmic calamities. Stars, meteor showers will be falling. The sun and the moon will darken for a period of time, and everything will just be kind of short-circuiting in a pretty crazy time. And then he says, at that time, we'll start realizing that the coming is about ready to happen. By the way, it is. 2.5 years later, he will come back. And I think it's during this time that many of the Jews will realize that they missed their Messiah, and they'll start looking for Jesus to come. Right? Let's look at our third set of passages, and that is Revelation chapter 4 through chapter 19. That is the other part of the Bible that really describes out the tribulation. Right? And as we've mentioned already, the book of Revelation really lays out the tribulation more definitely than all the rest of the books. However, there's more prophecy in the Old Testament than in the book of Revelation. All right, but look at Revelation chapter 6. Revelation 6. There's 3 sets of judgments in the tribulation, 3 sets of 7. The first set of 7 is called the sealed judgments, and you can write it down. The sets of judgments, the sealed judgments. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on these because I just went through them out of Matthew chapter 24. All right, but you can see in verse number 2 the white horse. All right, and it says the rider on it has a bow and a crown. And by the way, a bow with no arrows. What does white represent a lot of times? Yep,
Peace.
Peace. And that's exactly how the Antichrist will come in. He'll come in through peace. By the way, the book of Daniel tells us that he'll obtain his kingdom through flattery, through peace. All right, he'll negotiate a peace treaty, all those kind of things. He has a bow with no arrows. He doesn't do it by war, he does it with peace. Now, there will be some war that takes place after that. Look at verse 3. Verse 4 says, And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given unto him to take peace from the earth. All right, so there will be some war that goes on during this time. And we might talk about some of that war later on. The Bible seems to indicate that the countries of Russia and some of that northern confederacy will actually stage a fight against the Antichrist and try to invade. There will also be a southern army that comes up and tries to invade as well. Later on in the book of Revelation, we'll see that the kings from the east, probably China, maybe India as well, stage rebellion against the Antichrist. And so don't get the idea that the Antichrist just has everybody in the world in his back pocket, right? There will be some people that put up a fight against him, right? And there will be war during that time. Look at verse 5. We see a black horse. says he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. Of course, balances, are those little weights, when you put the weight on and it kind of goes up this way or that way. And that is how they used to buy and sell things. You put your gold on one side, you put the weight on the other, and you measure out the gold, how much gold you're going to give to pay for something. All right, and so we're talking about money here. Verse 6, and I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see that thou hurt not the oil and wine. All right, a penny was a day's wages. And so we see they either bought they used a day's wages to buy a meal of wheat or 3 meals of barley. Once again, can you imagine that? If you're a family, a family of 5, and Dad brings home 1 Happy Meal for all of you to share. All right. Or if you're a family of 11, as we have some represented here. All right. Can you imagine 1 Happy Meal? All right. Fighting over the fries and drink. All right. Maybe you say, Father, can I smell just the French fry bag or something like that? But nonetheless, famine. All right. Look at verse 8. And I looked and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed him, and power was given unto him over a 4th part of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, and with death, and with beasts of the earth. The beasts of the earth one kind of creeps me out a little bit. It almost seems like in the tribulation that God kind of turns the fear of man from beasts, and animals start turning on people. All right, now. You think, hey, we're king of the beasts, all right? Can you imagine if your dog really didn't fear you? All right? Especially your dog, all right? They can do a lot of damage. Animals can do a lot of damage. I remember when I was a kid, and I watched an Alfred Hitchcock movie called The Birds. And I don't remember a lot about it, but I just remember a guy getting his eye pecked out by a bird, all right? And the birds turned on all the people and tried to kill the town. And if you think about it, you say, oh, birds aren't scary. Yeah, they outnumber us so much, all right? Can you imagine if all the birds decided to just swarm down on you and start pecking you, all right? It would hurt, all right? And so, nonetheless, it says a 4th part of the earth are killed this way. Now, there's 7 billion people plus on the earth right now. So that means that we're talking about, what, 1.75 billion people, all right, something like that, are dying during just this seal judgment. All right, so a pretty bad judgment. All right, I mentioned seal number 5 are the martyrs praying to God, saying, God, when will you come back and get revenge for us? Look at verse 12. And I beheld, and when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth and hair. The moon became as blood. The stars of heaven fell to the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heavens departed as a scroll is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their place. All right, so you get the idea. Mountains are shaking, islands are moving. All right, meteors are falling. All right, and notice verse 16, the people are scared. And it says, and they'll say, said unto the mountains, fall, and us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? These people will actually recognize this is from God. And instead of repenting, you know what they'll say? Mountain, fall on us and hide us from God. I don't know. I've always wondered if they don't even actually see the big angry face in the sky. You know, it says hide us from the face of him. I almost wonder if they know he's coming. But nonetheless, a very, very powerful set of judgments, right? The 7th seal is just a half an hour of silence, and it preps for the next set of judgments. And write them down. They're called the 7 trumpet judgments. The 7 trumpet judgments. And they are found in Revelation chapter 8. Revelation chapter 8. The trumpet judgments. And let's look at these real quickly, and we're just going to kind of go through them quickly because Once again, we don't have, this is an overview here. Look at verse 7. It says, the first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast to the earth, and a third part of the trees burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Can you imagine that? All right? First of all the grass being burned up. That is what your food eats, right? You eat animals. Animals eat grass, all right? So that's a problem. Think about a third of the trees being burned up. That's a third of your shade. That's a third of your building materials. Plus, it's plant life that turns the sun's rays into photosynthesis, through photosynthesis. All right, cools the earth down. All right, all of that stuff. All right, serious problems there. Look at verse 8. The second angel sounded. There was, as it were, a great mountain burning with fire and cast in the sea. And a third part of the sea became blood. And a third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died. And a third part of the ships were destroyed. All right? And when we're talking about the sea, we're talking about the oceans, all right, salt water. All right, can you imagine that? 1/3 of the entire ocean turned to blood. Can you imagine the smell off of that? What if you were in an island surrounded by the blood? The smell, the disease. All right. I don't know, but I imagine that ships don't maneuver very well through thick blood, right? Maybe that's why a third of the ships are destroyed. A third of the sea life dies. There goes our fish, food, right? By the way, some of those islands, that's what they rely on to eat. So got some serious issues there. Look at verse 9. Probably one of the most devastating, I think. Verse 9, and a third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died. Verse 10. And a third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of the water. And the name of the star was called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood. And many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. So now we got a third part of the fresh water being poisonous. All right, so there goes all your water supply. You can live without food for a while, but living without water is bad. Third part of the water made poisonous. Look at verse 12. And the fourth angel sounded, and a third part of the sun was smitten, a third part of the moon, and a third part of the stars, so that as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. All right? So here we got a third of the sun, moon, and stars being smitten. All right? And it divides up the day into a different time. Right now, we have 12 hours of light and pretty much 12 hours of darkness, right? I mean, depending on where you are in the world, of course. I know like days, things like longer days or whatever. But this will be 8 hours of day, 8 hours of night light, and 8 hours of no light. You know what no light is like? All right? Where you have no sun, no moon, no stars, no light at all. I imagine except for the artificial light which maybe you could have. All right, but if a lot of the world is destroyed, who knows how much electricity we have. You ever go to one of the caverns? Pretty neat. You go down to some of these caverns where they'll take you down in there and they shut the lights off. You have absolute darkness. And I've been in a black chasm in an island, and put your hand right here, you can't see it at all. You can feel it, but you can't see it. And absolute darkness. All right? Look at chapter 9. And by the way, the last three trumpets, they're also called the three woes because they're really, really bad. Verse 1, it says, the fifth angel sounded, and I saw the star fall from heaven to the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened up the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, and the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them were given power as scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. And to them was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he strike the man. And so these things will be locust-like. It also describes them as kind of horse-shaped. All right, look at verse 7. The shapes of the locusts will be like horses prepared to battle, and on their heads were as it were crowns of gold. Their faces were like the faces of men. And they had hair like the hair of women, and their teeth was as the teeth of lions. So you see long hair, human-like face, all right, lion-like teeth, all right, a crown on their head like a kind of like a battle armor, something that protected their head. Notice in verse 9, breastplates, all right, so pretty much you can't bonk them on the head with something and kill them. You can't stab them because they've got a protective plate around them. And they have these scorpion stings that come over and sting a guy, and it doesn't kill a man, it just gives him pain, intense pain. And I don't know if it's intense pain for 5 months or if they cause pain for 5 months, all right? I'm not sure if these guys are around for 5 months or if they sting you and it hurts for 5 months. That's what I tend to think it is. Can you imagine that? All right? And by the way, the pain is so bad. Look at this, verse 6. And in those days shall men seek death and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. It'll be so bad that people want to die and they can't die. God actually kind of shuts off the ability to die. Almost like, no, you're not getting out of this easy. You're going to get judged. Can you imagine what that would be like? The guy says, I can't do it. I can't put up with these scorpion-like creatures anymore. I'm going to shoot myself. And they blow the brains out, but they don't die from it. They feel all the pain of the gunshot going through their head. But God says, nope, you're not going to die. I don't know what that guy would look like after he's done, but imagine a guy, saying, getting on a 10-story building and saying, "That's it, I'm ending it all," jumping off, landing, splat, but not dying from it. Very, very bad stuff. All right, nothing like wanting to die but not being able to accomplish it. And that's exactly what happens. All right. So that's seal 5. Now let's look at seal 6. Seal 6. By the way, you'll notice in seal 5 that these things come from the bottomless pit. These the seal 5, or trumpet 5 and trumpet 6, both of them come out of hell. Both of them come out of the bottomless pit. And these are creatures that are designed to punish bad angels. Right? So what is hell made for? The devil and his angels. They're not really made for humans. Humans go to hell, but they're not made for humans. Sometimes we think hell is bad because it's hot, because it's dark, and it's bottomless pits. There are creatures in hell that are there designed to hurt angels. That's their whole purpose. They were created to cause harm and pain to angels. When a person goes to hell, it's not just that they burn. It's not just that it's scary and dark. There are creatures now that are designed to cause pain. And that's what these creatures are. Here's another set of creatures. Look at this. Verse 13. And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel, which had the trumpet, "Loose the four angels that are bound in the river Euphrates, 4 angels that were loose, which are prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay a third part of the men." Right? So 1/3 of the population gets killed in this one. We had 1/4 earlier, now we have 1/3. By the way, if you add those two numbers, that's a half of the population right there, just in those two judgments. Luke verse 16. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000. All right, that's 200 million, by the way. Do that math. All right, and I heard the number of them. And thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them having breastplates of fire and of jacinth and of brimstone. And the heads of the horses were like heads of lions. Out of their mouth issued fire and smoke and brimstone. And by these three was the third part of men killed, by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone, which issued out of their mouths. And their power is in their mouth and in their tails. For their tails were like serpents that had heads, and with them they do hurt. All right, so these are horse-like creatures, and I think probably biggest horses All right, but they are like horses that have a rider on them, and they're fiery. They got a fiery breastplate. They breathe fire, and so they kill people that way. They breathe fire and brimstone, which is like a sulfur. All right, and they also have this tail that's like snakes. So if you try to sneak up on it, snakes would bite you. All right, if you come at it this way, the fire would get you. All right, and by the way, if you like taking notes, write down next to this passage Joel chapter 2. If you read Joel chapter 2, I think that Joel gives more description of these demonic-like creatures. Once again, these are creatures designed to hurt devils and designed to hurt angels. And Joel describes them as not only being quick, but they can climb walls and they can sneak up on you. It says that they can enter like a thief. All right, so can you imagine people running away from these things and maybe getting up in the room and hiding and sneaking away, and all of a sudden you see this big horse-like creature that are stealthily climbing up and all of a sudden sneaking in the window right behind you, and boom, there he is, I don't know, that's the picture I always get in my head. But very, very bad stuff, all right? Notice the result here. Look at this. What sad things here. Verse 20. And the rest of the men, which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of their works. So we see once again that man is stuck. God has now performed 14 different judgments, and yet man says, we're not going to repent. We don't care. We are not going to get right. Right? Let's look at the last three here. These are the vile judgments. Turn to Revelation chapter 16. Once again, we're not going over the whole book because it will take us a long time, all right? And if you're watching our video, we have a Wednesday night Bible studies that is covering it chapter by chapter, and those are a little bit more in-depth. But Revelation chapter 16 are the vile judgments. These are the worst. And by the way, you'll notice the judgments get worse, and they also get quicker. So the sealed judgments lasted for 3.5 years, all 7 of them. But the trumpets and the vials happen in the last 3.5 years. So they come a lot quicker, and they're a lot worse. And by the way, I think at the end there, they probably overlap each other, and man can't even recover. I mean, he's getting hit one after the other with these judgments. And these vile judgments are so bad, I don't think they could last very long, because I don't think human beings would survive if they did. We'll see some of these that I think probably have to finish pretty quickly, because there's no way they're able to survive. By the way, that's what Jesus said, right? Except those days were shortened, there should no flesh be saved. He said, by the end of this tribulation, if we didn't stop it, everybody would be killed. And I think when the tribulation is done, there isn't going to be very many people. Well, Jesus will come back and take care of all the non-believers. But look at chapter 16. Let's go through these vials real quickly here. Verse number 2. The first went up and poured out, and write that down, the 7 vial judgments. That's the third set of judgments. The first went out and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon men, which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped the image. All right, that image that was brought to life. Now all of a sudden they get a bad sore. And you might think, well, a sore, that doesn't seem really as bad. If God is saying it's a painful sore, it's probably a pretty painful sore, right? By the way, it only affects those people that are unsaved. It only affects people that have the mark of the beast. All right, it only affects people that are worshipers of the image, right? Notice verse number 3. And the second angel poured out his vial upon the sea, and it became blood of a dead man. Every living soul died in the sea. This is kind of like that trumpet judgment, but the trumpet judgment only affected a third. Now we got the whole thing. All the sea life dead. All the sea or the ocean turned to blood. By the way, that means probably travel's cut off now. I mean, maybe by airplane, but with all the earthquakes happening, probably all the airports are destroyed. Now all the shipping is gone. Now all the sea life is gone, which means that a big portion of our food supply is gone. All right, you can see why I say These things have to happen pretty quickly because here at the end, there's not going to be anybody left. If these things happen over the course of several years, nobody would survive. All right, or look at verse 4. And the third angel poured out his vial upon the rivers and the fountains of the water, and they became blood. I think this is probably the worst of all. There goes all our drinking water. Anyone drink blood? All the rivers and fountains of waters, the fountains being where the water comes from, all of those turn to blood. I assume we have maybe a certain stockpile of bottled water, but exactly how much water do we have stored up? I don't know. I don't know if we could be like the Egyptians who went around and dug more wells and maybe those weren't affected. But if the fountains of the waters were turned to blood, it would seem to be that you wouldn't find any water. All right. So you can see, I can't imagine people surviving very long if this one is left in place for a long time. All right, notice, look at verse number 8. All right, so we lost drinking water in the third vial judgment. Now look at the fourth one. And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given unto him to scorch men with fire. All right, so we lose our drinking water, and now the sun is heated up to where it burns you. All right, the sun's heat intensifies. Gives you bad sunburns, gives you heat. All right, it's bad being out in the hot sun with no water to drink. All right, and that's where they are. Look at how bad it is, verse 9. And men were scorched with great heat and blasphemed the name of God, which had power over this place. And they repented not to give glory. Notice no repentance. God is burning them up with the sun, and they're just cursing them out, saying that we're not going to repent. Look at verse 10. And the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gnawed their tongues for pain, and blasphemed the God of heaven because of their pains and their sores, and repented not of their deeds. Once again, no repentance. This is almost like the ninth plague. Remember, where it was darkness? God takes, it says, the kingdom of the kingdom, the beast's kingdom, probably the city where he rules out of, and it's called Babylon in the Bible. I don't know if it's the actual real Babylon being rebuilt. Some people think it might be Rome. There's some good description there for that. Nonetheless, the lights are turned out there. It's completely dark, and it's a darkness that can be felt, and it's a painful darkness. So you actually heard it says that they're in so much pain that they're gnawing on their tongues. All right? So they're in pain, and they're biting down, and breathing down, and they're biting on their tongues. That's how bad it hurts. All right? Look at verse 12. And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the waters thereof was dried up, and the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. So we see the invasion force of the kings of the east coming over. I told you there's a lot of wars. Those kings will start coming over to invade. Pretty much everything's falling in on the Antichrist at this point in time. All right. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For these are spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and the whole world, to gather them together to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. And so we see that both the Antichrist and the false prophet are demonically possessed here. The spirits come out of them, and they start going around the world and gathering all these kings. The kings of the east start gathering people to this one spot. The spot of the battle of Armageddon. That's what it's called. Look at verse 15. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. All right, and we'll actually look at that in the next lesson. But that will be the place where Jesus comes back. All right. Look at verse 17. The seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven and from the throne saying, "It is done." And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth. So mighty an earthquake and so great. So the greatest earthquake that's ever happened will happen at this time. All right, the great city was divided into 3 parts. All right, and the cities of the nations fell. So all the major cities get destroyed. The great city gets broken up into 3 parts. And look at this. And great Babylon came in remembrance. That is the city of the Antichrist, Babylon. Came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of wrath. And every island fled away. Does that mean only islands sink? About that. Islands like Taiwan, Philippines, Malaysian islands, Indonesian islands, they all sink. And all the people there perish. Right? Japan. All right? Look at verse 20. Every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. The mountains just get toppled. I don't know. Obviously, that material goes somewhere. All right? Verse 21. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent. And a talent weighs 113 pounds. That's a hailstorm. You get hit by one of those, you will be deeply impressed. All right? It will hurt. All right? And then look at this: blaspheme God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great. Once again, all 3 sets of judgments. The what judgments? The seals, trumpets, vials, or sometimes they're called the bowls, like bowls. All right. And after every one of them, the response of man is not repentant. That shows you how bad man is. All right, let's end right there. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for today. Thank you for this class. Pray that you would bless us and help us to be soft and tender to your words. In Jesus' name, amen.